Most people believe they understand capitalism. They think it's built on free markets, minimum government, and a simple idea that if everyone follows their own self-interest, society will somehow organize itself automatically. And when asked where this idea comes from, the answer is almost always the same. Adam Smith, the man with the powdered wig, the so-called father of economics, the symbol of laissez-faire capitalism. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Adam Smith never believed in the version of capitalism that quotes him today. In fact, many of the people who proudly use his name are the same people he warns society about. Welcome to the financial historian, where money, power, and history collide, and where nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Before we talk about the invisible hand, we need to step back, because most people have never actually heard what Adam Smith stood for. And that is not entirely their fault. For over a century, an entire economic mythology has been built around Smith's name. A mythology repeated so often that it feels like common sense. The story goes like this. Government should stay out of the economy. Markets should operate freely, and competition will naturally create prosperity for everyone. Later, economists gave this idea a name, laissez-faire, a French phrase meaning let it be, or hands off. According to this story, Adam Smith invented it. That he trusted markets more than governments, that he believed greed was the engine of progress, that unregulated commerce would lead humanity forward. It is a clean story, simple, ideological. But it has one serious problem. Adam Smith never said any of this, not once. If Adam Smith could see what modern capitalism calls free markets, he would probably ask a simple question. Who rewrote my book? And why did they remove all the warnings? To understand Smith, we must understand the world he lived in. Adam Smith was born in 1723 in Scotland, a society defined by hierarchy, limited opportunity, and inherited privilege. Britain at the time was not a land of free markets. It was a mercantilist empire. Trade was controlled by royal monopolies. Prices were fixed by guilds. Industries were dominated by cartels. And global commerce was ruled by massive corporations like the East India Company. A company with its own army, its own territories, and power-rivaling governments. This was the world Smith studied. A world where markets were not free, but shaped, manipulated, and often rigged by those with money and political influence. And Smith was deeply suspicious of this system. He famously wrote that people of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public. In simple terms, when powerful businessmen gather, society usually. This is not the language of blind faith in markets. It is a warning, and here's another truth modern textbooks often ignore. Adam Smith was not trained as an economist. He did not even consider himself one. He was a moral philosopher. Before The Wealth of Nations, Smith wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments, a book focused not on money, but on human behavior, empathy, fairness, and morality. Smith believed societies survive not because of greed, but because of moral restraint. He studied why humans care about justice, why we feel sympathy for others, and why social trust matters. In Smith's world, economics was never separate from ethics, which brings us to the most misunderstood phrase in economic history, the invisible hand, the phrase everyone quotes, the phrase used to justify deregulation, corporate freedom, and minimal oversight. But here's the truth that changes everything. Adam Smith used the phrase only 3 times across everything. 3 times! And not once did he describe it as a universal law of markets. Not once did he say markets regulate themselves. Not once did he argue that greed guarantees social good. In fact, Smith believed the opposite. He believed that economies function well only when power is dispersed, rules are enforced, and moral behavior is expected. He supported government involvement in education, infrastructure, banking, public works, and the regulation of monopolies. He did not oppose regulation. He opposed stupid regulation. Smith feared what happens when corporations become too powerful, too political, and too entrenched. The East India Company was his warning sign, a monopoly that distorted markets and corrupted governments. Smith called it a destructive force. If Adam Smith were alive today, looking at modern tech giants, pharmaceutical monopolies, and financial institutions too big to fail, he would likely ask the same question again. No. The invisible hand was never meant to be worshipped. It was a rare exception, not a rule. Smith believed that sometimes, and only sometimes, human self-interest accidentally produces positive outcomes. Not because people are virtuous. Not because markets are magical. but because human behavior has limits. Smith's vision was not chaos, it was balance. Markets strong enough to innovate, governments strong enough to restrain, and societies wise enough to demand fairness. Adam Smith never promised that the invisible hand would save us. He believed something far more difficult, that we must save ourselves through rules, ethics, responsibility, and moral judgment. And that is the